Hello and welcome to an episode which will discuss conflict reporting. I am Ramesh Menon. I have been a journalist for the last 32 years and have worked across print, television and the internet. I have enjoyed all the three mediums as it was really a life full of adventure and action as a reporter. There was not a single boring day. I have covered 2 wars and numerous communal riots, and it was a great educative experience. Today, we are going to examine conflict reporting in all its aspects, its intricacies, its dangers, and the responsibility with which a reporter must work when he is in the conflict zone. We will see how both the print and the electronic media can play an important part in diffusing tension and reducing conflicts. We will see why alarmist reporting can have dangerous consequences and can lead to more conflict. We will attempt to understand the different forms of violence, the causes of conflict, how to resolve conflict, and the different aspects we need to constantly examine when we are conflict reporters. We will also see how to report communal conflicts, insurgency, and war. Let us start with a quote by Ross Howard that tells it all. Professional journalists do not set out to reduce conflict. They seek to present accurate and impartial news, but it is often through good reporting that conflict is reduced. Ross Howard. Good journalism is difficult work even in the best of times. There is never enough information when a crisis breaks out. There is also a shortage of time and so much has to be researched and carefully put together. But all the same, it has to be done. Usually, reporters rely on their experience to overcome such difficulties so that they can deliver news that is both accurate and impartial. When a society is threatened by violent conflict, journalism faces greater difficulties. Often, opposing sides try to control the flow of information, media reporting, and the slant of stories. That is why conflict journalists have to be extremely careful. Available information that is easily available may not be reliable. It needs to be checked and counter-checked.
Two, three things are there that you have to keep in mind. One is the technical aspects of it. If you are a print reporter, you have to make sure that at the spot that you're going, you have facilities to file, a computer, access to the internet. If you are a television reporter, you need access to an uploading station, some place where you can actually go and convey your story back home. One is technical. The other problem that you face is physical, on the ground. Conflict areas, be it a small riot in your neighborhood or a big war zone. There's some very basic things like you have to be careful of the physical presence there, how you take care of your safety, and the third challenge of course is what to report from there, because things can get very confusing in a conflict situation.
In a conflict situation, what is crucial is to provide reliable information to the public, but this needs special skills on the part of the journalist. He or she has to work very hard at research, talk to a lot of people and get experts to simplify it. Reporters need to know where to look for causes and solutions. By providing accurate information, journalism helps the public to be better informed about the conflict and look critically at angles behind the violence. It also helps them in resolving the violence as they understand it better. Reporters need to be aware of this crucial role that journalism can play in a time of conflict.
One strategy, research and homework. You should not be in a conflict situation talking to somebody and suddenly you are like, oh, what is this? You have to have things in mind. Secondly, discuss it with the newsroom. The newsroom, the organization that is sending you, they have some things in mind when you go to a conflict area. If you're covering a local riot, for example, they will want to know the impact on the local people. If you are, for example, going abroad to cover a war in Afghanistan, they will want to know if there's any Indian involved there. So there are different things that you have to keep in mind while going there. Another important aspect is sourcing. You are prepared, you have your background knowledge of the situation, but you need to have sources on the ground. You have to hit the ground running. You don't have time there to go and make friends. So you have, before you reach the spot, you have to make sure you know somebody who's there on the ground, somebody who can tell you what is happening.
Conflict is a situation where two or more individuals or groups try to pursue goals or ambitions which they believe they cannot share. All conflict need not be violent. Some people want change, but others disagree. If their disagreement or their conflict is managed peacefully, it can be a positive process. But when conflict is not managed properly, it becomes violent. In violent conflict, people fear for their safety and survival. When we say conflict, we are usually referring to violent conflict. Conflict usually arises when resources are scarce and not shared fairly, as in food, housing, jobs or land. There is little or no communication between the two groups. The groups have incorrect ideas and beliefs about each other. Unresolved grievances exist from the past. Power is unevenly distributed. Reporters can easily describe violent physical conflict. That is because individuals or groups in conflict try to hurt or kill each other and there are victims. But there can be other kinds of violence which do great harm in a society, and these are more difficult for reporters to explain or even detect. That is why they have to be very alert all the time and ensure that they are not used by the agents of conflict to push their agenda.
One of the biggest dilemmas faced by a conflict reporter is deciding on who's right or wrong. Once you're on the field, it's very difficult to distinguish, which side is correct, which is incorrect. The best idea is not to get into that at all. You are a reporter. As a reporter, you're objective. Your job is to be on the ground and report what you see. If you decide who's wrong, who's right, you get into semantics, it's a big problem. Of course, in some areas it is very clear. If you are, say, covering a terrorist attack like the Mumbai attack, you definitely know that these terrorists are killing people, so of course they are wrong, so you report accordingly. But in a lot of other situations, say a riot, two groups clashing on, say, water, how do you decide what is wrong or right? You should not. You just go on the spot, talk to people, get the feeling, present both sides equally and give them equal opportunity to come up with a point of view.
Cultural violence can include hate speeches where one individual or leader tries to create feelings of hatred against another group. It could also be xenophobia, which incites hatred or fear of another group or country, creates misperceptions and encourages policies which promote conflict. In India, we have seen how regional leaders stir up hatred against those from another state for narrow political gains. It could also be religious justifications for war. extreme intolerance of other beliefs can end up in promoting conflict. There have been disturbing instances of gender violence in India where practices and informal laws against women are pushed through. Women end up paying a heavy price as they become the target of violence. It is very disturbing to see it happen in modern India. Structural violence is harm which is built into the laws or the traditional behavior of a group or society. Here harm is permitted or ignored. Structural violence can be institutionalized racism or sexism where laws and practices allow unequal treatment based on race or sex. It could also be poverty. By the way, this is one of the world's leading causes of conflict. As inequality grows, conflicts will naturally increase. Corruption and nepotism could be another factor. Here governmental decisions are influenced or decided by bribery, favoritism, family or tribal connections. This can lead to a lot of heartburn, anger and bitterness. Violence could also be structural segregation, where you have conditions which force people to live in separate groups or places against their will. Both cultural and structural violence are extremely important to identify when reporting and analyzing conflict. Often, these factors are responsible for direct physical violence. Always explain the conflict and its different dimensions in the simplest way possible so that people can understand it in the right perspective. Journalists often ignore the basics as they understand it perfectly and assume that everyone also does. We must remember that we journalists do not write or report for ourselves. We are supposed to cater to vast, diverse audiences. Generally, most societies find out ways to resolve conflict or regulate it without violence. Usually, a village elder is given authority by the community to resolve the conflict. It is quite common in India. The decision is respected and so the conflict gets resolved. But as society gets more complex, this is becoming difficult to end conflict. We must understand that conflict does not end by itself. We have to work towards ending it. One of the most important things to resolve conflict is communication. For two sides in a conflict situation, it is imperative to talk. Good journalism must encourage this. After all, good journalism is a constant process of seeking solutions. The news media is often the most important channel of communication that exists between sides in a conflict. Many a time, conflicting parties talk to each other through the media. Good journalism tries to educate one group about the other side's point of view. Journalism which explores each side's particular difficulties, such as its politics or powerful interests, can help educate the other side. Often, one of the major factors of conflict is lack of trust. The media can reduce suspicion by digging into hot issues and revealing them so that there are no secrets to fear. By examining and reporting on the misperceptions that two groups have of each other, the media can encourage conflicting sides to revise their views and move closer to reducing conflict. It might help if the media gave the conflicting issue a human angle. It could do this by putting in real people describing how the conflict was hurting them. Also, to write with feeling. Good reporting tries to go deep to identify the underlying interests of the conflicting groups. It does this by asking tough questions and seeking out the real meaning of what leaders say. Good reporting also looks beyond the narrow interests and focuses on the larger picture. There must be some emotional outlet for conflict resolution to happen. Otherwise, suppressed anger will explode, worsening the situation. The media can create that outlet by letting both the parties speak freely and openly. In a conflict, describing the problem in a different way can reduce tension and encourage peace talks. In good journalism, editors and reporters are always looking for a different angle, an alternate view, a new insight which will attract readers and viewers. Good journalism can help reframe conflicts for both the sides. When leaders try to solve a conflict, they must have a face-saving situation to show to their supporters. Again, the media can help them by getting them to resort to face-saving statements. In a conflict, both sides must eventually present specific proposals to respond to grievances. On a daily basis, good reporting does this by asking the disputing parties for their solutions instead of just repeating the rhetoric of grievances. We must remember that good journalism is a constant process of seeking solutions. Conflicting groups have to be made to believe that they taste success if they meet the other side for negotiations. Good journalism encourages negotiation because the reporting is impartial and balanced. It gives attention to all sides. It encourages a balance of power for the purpose of hearing grievances and seeking solutions. Conflict is resolved by providing accurate information. Journalism makes the public far better informed about the conflict beneath the violence and can assist in resolving it. There are different ways to tackle conflict. Let us see how the different methods work or do not work. Here the scenario could be that the stronger party wins, or one group could compensate the other by paying up. Here one or both groups walk away. The conflict is unresolved and both the groups are unsatisfied, or both could do nothing to resolve the conflict and the stalemate continues. Here the conflicting groups arrive at a compromise. Both the groups feel that they have resolved the conflict. With conflict analysis, journalists can understand what diplomats and negotiators are trying to do and can report it more reliably. This can also help journalists identify more sources to go for information and add to it. Accuracy plus impartiality plus responsibility is equal to reliability. These are basic standards that produce journalism that can be trusted. That is why it is called reliable journalism. All reliable reporting should be accurate, impartial and responsible. It applies to every aspect of the job: assigning stories, editing copy or sound bites, writing headlines, directing, producing or managing newsrooms. Good reporters should ask themselves these questions. Does my work meet the test of reliable journalism? Does my report have accuracy, impartiality and responsibility? If we report only the bare facts about violent conflict, citizens will only understand the conflict in those terms. But if we search for the news behind the hidden facts and present more information and possible solutions, they may see the conflict in a different perspective. A sensitive journalist applies conflict analysis and searches for new voices and new solutions for the conflict. They look at different perspectives and report on how other conflicts that were similar were resolved. They do not take sides. They choose their words carefully. Avoid reporting just what two sides are saying. Include other opinions, including those of the victims and others who want the conflict to end. Avoid defining the conflict in the ways that leaders want. Get commoners also to have their say, and chances are that it might reflect what the majority feels. Avoid reporting what divides the sides in conflict. Find out if you can report on common goals they have. Avoid focusing on fear. Avoid words like devastated, tragedy and terrorized to describe what one group is suffering from. Avoid emotional and imprecise words. Avoid making an opinion into a fact. If someone claims something, state their name so that it is their opinion and not your fact. Explore peace ideas. Put these ideas to the leaders and report on their response. If you, as a responsible journalist, follow a checklist like this, you will find it very easy to do justice to conflict journalism. As journalists, our most powerful tools are the words that we use and the pictures and the sounds. We can use our tools to build understanding instead of fears and myths. No journalist can be completely objective. Journalists, like everyone, carry the values of their home country, their religion and their ethnic group. That is why professional journalists have standards for accuracy, impartiality and responsibility to remove any personal values and bias. Reliable journalism is accurate, balanced and responsible. Culture, race and religion should have no influence on our reporting. Our newsroom should represent many colors of race, religion, caste and culture. We should be as diverse as possible. While reporting communal conflicts, a reporter has to be extremely careful not to fan sensitive feelings or rake up emotions. A small slip can lead to more riots, more injuries and more deaths. Desist from naming communities, giving the names of the victims and falling for the temptation of describing everything in graphic detail. While the Indian media has played a responsible role at times, it has often sensationalized communal riots and even misreported facts, creating more trouble and agony for thousands of innocent victims. Be as objective as possible. Reporters do not belong to any caste or religion. The only religion should be journalism. This is another sensitive territory. A reporter must get into the heart of the problem. The best way to do that is to read about it, study the history and the genesis of the problem. Reporters should not get trapped in stereotypes. All insurgents are not fighting for justice. The United Liberation Front of Assam may be demanding autonomy, but it is extremely difficult today to find an Assamese who wants to be away from the Union of India. So, a reporter must investigate who is funding the movement, find out who is training and where the camps are. Look at the human rights violations. Report without any prejudice. Most journalism students start off wanting to cover war. They get carried away with the glamour and the hype, but it's neither at the end of the day. It's extremely hard work and can be very strenuous. It can also be very dangerous. Get yourself insured before going to the war front. Numerous journalists have died on the battlefield. Learn about guns, missiles, aircraft, bombs, biological warfare, army formations, ranks, battalions, battle strategies, and so on. Modern wars have seen embedded journalists traveling with the army of their country. But this at best gives you only one part of the story, as reporters do not have access to the other side. Accurate reporting can also stop wars. It helps build public opinion of the war. The Vietnam War was an excellent example of how this happened.
The biggest thing that you should be looking at is situational awareness. You should be very perfectly clear on how bad things can turn up, what are the possibilities of problem there, and who you can turn to resolve them. So if you are, say, going to a local area, you should be in touch before going there with the local police walas. They should know where you are traveling. They should know how long you will be there. So in case you are caught, you're detained, somebody knows where you are, your situation is known. If you are not in India, you're abroad, you don't have the luxury of your own Indian police there, so you should be in touch with your embassies there. You should be in touch with local reps, Indians. At least 3 or 4 people should always know your location at all times.
To conclude, let us quickly summarize what we have touched upon today. Understanding conflict. Importance of sensitive conflict reporting. How reporters can actually help resolve conflicts with the accurate reporting and proper framing of their story. Causes of conflict. Understanding cultural and structural violence. How to become a good channel for communication between warring groups. How to educate citizens on the real issues. How to help confidence building. Giving conflict a human angle. Checklist for conflict journalists. How to report communal conflicts, insurgency and war. Conflict journalism is challenging and difficult. But if we do what we have discussed today, we will at least emerge as sensitive conflict journalists who will make a difference. That's all for today. Take care and all the best.